IP in animation and their exploitation will be starting in another 5 minutes. So just bear with us. Our esteemed speakers are all here. So just in another 5 minutes we will just start.
Quickly welcome Mr. Jay Maru from Shemaru Entertainment, Nishit Takia from Crayon Pictures, Rajiv Chilaka from Green Gold, Krishna Desai from Turner Cartoon Network, and Sharad Devrajan from Graphics India. So friends, today our topic is emerging trends of Indian IP in animation and their exploitation. It's extremely important that we actually debate this particular topic out, and that's why we constituted the panel, which is a mix of we have a person from distribution who is actually taking our content to various countries. We have a broadcaster who actually have created a huge impact on creating Indian IP. They're one of the strongest channels who have created Indian IP and supported Indian IP. At the same time, we have the biggest guy who has created the biggest brand in this country from animation, Rajiv with Chhota Bheem. At the same time, we have a very great insight from Nishit, who actually has created the feature film, and as the feature film goes to various markets. So we are going to really see, in terms of an IP, whether a feature film or the television series really moves forward. But the thing is that there are various different ways and means of creating IP and finally converting those IPs into animation. And that's where we have very interesting insights coming from the whole lot of experience that Sharad brings to this panel, having created a series of comic books and how those comic books are getting ready to be converted into animation and become global properties from India. At the same time, my experience of creating IP both on the television side and the feature film side, we have a great amount of learning as to why and how, irrespective of the policy that Indian government has, which probably supports the services industry much strongly than creating an IP industry in this country. We actually require a coexistence of outsourcing co-productions as well as IP creation. But as far as the co-productions and IP creations are concerned, we are extremely weak as of today as a country to put our best foot forward in becoming a partner on some of these critical areas. So we are going to have very specific questions and specific learnings from an experienced panel today. And before we move forward, let me actually give all our 5 panelists the first opening remarks for 2 to 3 minutes each, so that they can actually set the tone, and I will come up with very, very specific questions for them as we move forward. And then we would have taken certain time out to make sure that we have answered questions from the audience also. So let's start with Sharad from that side, and then we will come from there to this side. No, can you get the mic with me?
So first, thanks for taking the time, and everyone for being here. It's a great honor to be here amongst so many friends and colleagues and people that I really admire in the industry. So, I think the biggest thing that we need to look at is, in a larger context, is the ecosystem. How are we building a cohesive ecosystem that really supports learnings, best practices, helps push people up, and helps build value for all of us as we try and move into the IP value chain of where India can be. Ultimately, it wasn't just Japanese kids that made Pokemon. It was every kid around the world. And we've seen this story over and over, whether it's Western superheroes, whether it's a British character like Harry Potter, whether it was the Japanese anime and manga revolution, whether it's Korea, China, Japan. Asia and Europe and the US have been very prolific at this. Now, our belief, and I run a company, Liquid Comics and Graphic India, has really been to find the next J.K. Rowling, Steven Spielberg, Stan Lee sitting here in India, give them the skills, the opportunity, and the platform by which they can take those stories out to the world. So, I'll give you two just quick examples of projects that we've worked on recently that give you a sense of how we think about IP. We think that certainly what we have to do is not shortchange the consumer. We think the Indian kids of today and the Indian consumers of today are used to seeing the best of the world. They're watching the biggest movies, the biggest animated shows, the biggest levels of content from anywhere in the world. And what they expect, they don't really sit there and say, well, that costed that much, this was the budget of that, wow, look at the comparables. They actually did pretty good with the money they got. They sit there and say, was it a great experience? So ultimately, what we have to do as storytellers is provide fantastic experiences to the consumer and recognize that they don't care about our constraints. All they care about is what they see. So, to that extent, we think that there's two things we look at. One is, how do we create a story that not just sits, hopefully, into the heart of Indians and Indian consumers, but has the ability to transcend the national market and go into the global market. We look at that as a creation model where we try and bring creators in from the ground level from East and West. I'll give you a great example that we were fortunate enough to work with our friend Krishna and the Cartoon Network and Turner team, on a project we're launching later this month with Stan Lee. So Stan Lee was the creator of Spider-Man, X-Men, Hulk, Fantastic Four, probably the greatest creator of comic book characters in the world. And he worked with us to develop his first Indian superhero called Chakra the Invincible, which we're launching on Cartoon Network later this year, and really brings together, yeah, and thanks to Krishna for that, really, because I think that also shows that their network was willing to take a risk, do something a little out of the box, and do something that I think shows that they're pushing the Indian IP level. But what's equally validating was that this character we created and the content we created, for the first time when, Rovio recently announced, the maker of Angry Birds, that they were going to shift the Angry Birds platform on a global level to becoming a video platform and select just a few IPs from around the world to be featured on an app that's been downloaded by 2 billion people, 2 billion times. And Chakra is now going to be featured on that app also starting in December, which will be launched worldwide in multiple languages to audiences around the world, and making it the first Indian IP to really reach on that Tunes TV platform and reach that level of exposure. So it's a property that we see as not only just Indian, but something that can transcend to the global markets. And when we look at the revenue stream, the business models, and how we monetize on that, that all comes into line on how we can develop an IP that reaches that level of mass. Similarly, we created another project where we reinvented the Mahabharata as a series called 18 Days. We launched that in partnership with YouTube as our financing partner and our strategic partner, and we brought in the writer of Batman from the West, so a gentleman named Grant Morrison. So when it was launched in the first month. It got over 2 million views on YouTube, and the audience that came to it was half the people knew nothing about the Mahabharata, they had no idea who that blue guy was, had all kinds of questions. The other half came from India and had a whole history about it. And it was a global dialogue, a global exchange, and a global property that was reaching out to people when we launched it at the San Diego Comic-Con. So similarly, now we're taking that property from digital, where we incubate and develop, whether it's in a comic book, a digital motion comic, an animated series, into live action feature film, live action television, and all of those other platforms. So, at the center of it, it's about great story and storytelling, but we think the truth is multi-platform and global is how you have to think of your stories today.
Hello everyone, good morning. We are in 2013, and I think last 15 years the animation industry has evolved. There have been lots of ups and downs. The companies pretty much that started from 98 to 2003, hardly 5% of the companies exist today. And 95% of the companies either merged with some other company, they shut down, or a lot of changes have happened. Companies have primarily chosen majorly service model or work for hire. While Green Gold, since its inception, we have worked on IP model, that is intellectual property, and our primary focus area has always been India so far. We would love to change that going forward, but at the moment we've been still focused on the Indian market, but as there is immense scope for still developing more IP. In the past 13 years, we have grown from a company of 4 people to today we stand at about 310 people. So not only in terms of people we have grown, but also in terms of content we have grown. So first 5 years we produce about 5 episodes of animation, that's it. And after that, the last 7-8 years we produce over 300 episodes of animation content. Give you an example how fast we are working is, I met this huge studio from Brazil about 2 years ago. In the last 2 years, they have produced about 26 episodes of content, while we have produced almost 200 episodes of content in the last 2 years alone. One, if you want to make IP viable and everything, you need to work on volumes, and you need to have a lot of shows. No one knows which show is going to work. Neither the channel knows, neither the creators know what show is going to work. So we always have to give it a shot. We have produced Vikram Betal, Krishna movie series. We have produced Chota Bheem, Mighty Raju, Krishna Balram, and most recently Chor Police and Love Kush. That's so far what we have done. Going forward, we're continuing to work on Mighty Raju and Chota Bheem. Besides that, we're also working on a new series called Arjun, which is a spin-off from one of the Chota Bheem movies which we released earlier. While it's important that you have content IP, you own the IP, you monetize the content, but you need to also build an infrastructure around it, and we are one of the first few companies in India to start building towards that. There's a long way to go for that. So we started with 1 or 2 products that we started. We started with Chota Bheem Comics. We started distributing in the market, and in the end of about 4 years ago when we started, end of first year, we had about 10 products. Today in 2013, we have 3,000 products based on our IP, and that we distribute across 50,000 outlets across India. We also have our own stores called Green Gold Stores. We also have our own stores. We have about 30 across the country. We have 2 in Bangalore as well. But primarily the biggest lesson for us has been that you just can't assume anything. You just need to keep working hard day in, day out. No one knows where the next best IP is going to be. But I think the industry has a very bright future, whether it is a work for hire or IP. So I think we're all looking at a great future ahead. So wishing you all the best.
Hi, this is Nishit here, and we have produced a feature film called Delhi Safari, and it has taken us almost 5 years to get that film on the screens in different parts of the world, and there's been a lot of learning that has happened, and I think strategically what our company needs to, and what we are really looking at, is how to exploit the current property that we have into various other formats. So we are certainly going to look at the characters of Delhi Safari, view stories around those characters which have been seen by lots of people, and try to gain momentum with that property. So one other thing we are doing is we are looking at producing a sequel to the film with China. So already our discussions are on the way, and we are really looking forward to start that work very soon. The other thing that we are seriously looking at is creating a TV series with the same characters. We already have a pilot. We have interest from some of the channels in India and outside to take this property forward. But when we are looking at producing new IPs, new characters, I think personally I would like to go Sharad's way. I think it is extremely expensive to create content that we can probably showcase to the rest of the world. And one of the good thing about doing animation is, I always tell people that a tiger or a lion in China is not chinky and he's not black in Africa. They all look the same. So you have characters that everybody can resonate and everybody can connect with. So I think we need to test out, we all feel that we are going to create great properties, but like what Raju just said, nobody knows what's going to work. So we may be able to de-risk what we are trying to do instead of investing money in making the film and then trying to find out if there's a market for it. Probably look at comics, digital comics, and graduate and mature us by using social platforms and talking to people and see how we can scale this popularity of our characters, because IPs, I think, are primarily character driven. Today, Chota Bheem, everybody loves Chota Bheem as that character. So whatever story Chota Bheem wants to tell, all the kids want to align with his story. So I think it is very important to know that your character is going to be loved by people. And I think today we are lucky, we have technology with our side, we have social networking platforms which allow us to expose what we are trying to think inside our little offices and share it with the world, and see how we can progress with that. So it would be less risky. Instead of doing one IP, you can look at 5 projects or 6 IPs that you can do, share it with people, figure out what is working with everybody else, and then go ahead and do that. Because when you are investing money and making an IP, primarily you are making an IP for the rest of the world to see. It's not for personal consumption, and it's extremely expensive. So that's what we have learned from our small little journey in the last 5 years. So, but I think that's a great future for India. We have an extremely talented creative pool. I mean, you see Indian culture, we are filled with art of more longer period of time than almost any other country in the world. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of good scope. We all need to relook, rethink, and learn from the mistakes and the learnings of other people, and probably carve a path for us which makes most sense to us. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jay Maru of Shimaru. We're a 50-year-old brand that's been associated with entertainment across many, many forms, starting with Bollywood films, but today across the entertainment verticals, whether it be music, movies, or film content, TV content across languages. And our journey started in 2006 which is the case for a lot of people, when a little film called Hanuman broke some box office records, and everyone woke up to the possibilities of original IP and what it can do. And we started from a slightly different point of view than most other people. Like Rajiv, we did actually start by saying it's about the creation of IP. And at that time, we were quite different from the rest of the industry, because we were one of those rare people that was making IPs and had no production capacity, not a single animator in-house. And till date, we do not. We are not an animation studio. However, we were filmmakers, we were film marketers and distributors. We understood the power of IP, the power of creating content and marketing and distributing it. And that's really how we approached the whole thing from the beginning. And our conscious decision to not start a production studio was from the point of view that that's a completely different business model and has a whole other set of variables and manpower and bench strength and all other kinds of things that you do not want to get into. We very clearly understood that the challenge that the industry faced at that time when we mapped it was you have a lot of people, very, very talented people with great production and artistic capacity who, however, do not understand making films or distributing films. So you've got the art, so you've got the construction engineers, but you didn't have the design architects. And that's really where we saw our role, because that's the piece we understood. And we started collaborating with other studios on the production side of things, but we basically said we will work on the creative, so the script, the storyboard. We will work on creative aspects that are not understood by animation studios, such as music, which is integral to films in India. And we will work on the distribution and marketing, so getting the film to the audience or the audience to the film, both of which are equally important. And that's really the role that we played. In our own modest way, we do believe we've been a success. The one thing that we do strongly believe is that irrespective of whether we won awards or not, the one thing that our claim to fame, a lot of people came and went in the industry, tried to make films, didn't make a second film or changed away in what they're doing. We've done a film a year since 2007. Every single year we've had a film being released, right? Starting from Bal Ganesh, which was one of the first characters that really became beloved of children, and we completely understand how Chhota Bheem works, because the sheer stickiness of characters like Bal Ganesh and Chhota Bheem is something to be aspired to by everybody. I mean, it's ultimately what we all hope for. Two key things that worked for us. One was the very first few things two features that we did. We had a lot of learnings in terms of marketing and distribution, what the market can and cannot support. And so one key difference that happened for us is in especially 2009 and 10, when the rest of the industry was still coming off the high of how things can really go to the next level and scale up, we actually were saying, no, things cannot scale up, because you have to go with what the market can support and expand that. And so we were making films at a different size and scale, smaller size and scale than what other people were attempting, and people actually thought that we were in many cases shortchanging them when they had conversations with us. But that actually is what worked. And Krishna's here, he's been a great supporter. Star Network has been a great supporter, and they're regular customers of ours. And they know that what we've pulled off, and in the budgets that we've pulled it off, we are not aiming to be Pixar, but it was what the market supported, right? It worked. It allowed us to create a category, create a sustained environment where more content could keep coming in. We could keep going back. They could keep putting more out because it was a win-win. It worked within the parameters that the market could support at that time. And now that that has happened, it has given us enough leverage, enough cash flow, enough confidence to be able to take it to a higher scale. So while most of us who talked about Indian IP in 2009 and 10 were like, oh, we should be able to do this, we should be able to do this. No, this is what you can support, and this is what you can aspire to. You cannot straight away run before you can walk. And that's really, if we look at what has happened, the people that have succeeded, right? And the people that have sustained, right? So whether it's the people on the dais here, it's the people who have managed to start with what is possible and stretch those boundaries. And starting from, if you look at the kind of quality of some of our films, Bal Ganesh, I do not claim is going to beat Pixar at its game, right? But Bal Ganesh worked, it stuck, it delivered TRPs, it made money for the networks. Bal Hanuman 2, for whatever its quality was, did deliver TRPs, did deliver money to the networks, and that allows us to scale up to a